Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this episode, I'm gonna go over 5 things that you should not do around Swedish people, and these are things that I've learned after living in Sweden as an American over the past 4 years. The first thing you should not do around Swedish people, and this is gonna be one for my American friends especially, it's to not brag too much about yourself. Now, in all of Scandinavia, people have a very reserved culture, and it's a very group socialistic mentality where you're not supposed to stand out from the crowd as much as we do in, say, the US, where people are sort of encouraged from a very, very early age to stand out. And there's this thing in Scandinavia called Jantelagen. It's sort of an older law, and I've made videos about Jantelagen in the past. You can check it out up here, but it's basically a law that says you're not supposed to think of yourself as being anything special. You're not supposed to stand out. There's a whole bunch of rules that go into this law, but a lot of Swedish people actually abide by this in their day-to-day lives.
We have something in Sweden called Jantelagen. If something great happens or you achieve something, Swedes get very embarrassed and they apologize.
What about the royal family? Are they? I mean, they have to be flashy. They have a crown and they have robes.
Well, I think it's very slightly schizophrenic for them because they're the royal family, but they're also Swedes. So they're like, "Hey, I'm the king. Sorry."
So if you're meeting Swedish people at a party or something and you're hyping up your own accomplishments, maybe what you did with work or social accomplishments or whatever it is that you've achieved, if you're saying too much of this and it comes off in braggy in any sort of way, it's gonna be a huge turnoff to Swedish people. And I think wherever you are in the world, being humble is a very attractive trait. And I think in Sweden, it's okay to be confident, but just don't be over the top sharing about what you've accomplished, especially right off of the bat when meeting Swedish people, because it's definitely not what they're used to and it might come off the wrong way. Number 2 is don't forget to bring your own alcohol. Now in Sweden, when you go to a party, normally everybody brings their own alcohol. Normally when you go into the refrigerator at a party, there's all the bags from the Swedish liquor store, the Systembolaget, because everybody went to the liquor store before the party and they put all their beers or whatever they're drinking in those bags. So normally there's no space in the refrigerators when you go to a party here in Sweden. But in Sweden, you're pretty much expected to BYOB, bring your own booze. Now there are some times where the hosts will offer stuff to you, but I would say it's slightly less common than in the US. It's a bit more common that the host will offer booze to the people that came over. I'm not really sure why this is. Maybe it's just this mentality of everybody sort of providing for themselves because everybody's sort of well taken care of in the society here in Sweden. And it's the same thing if you're going out to drinks at a bar or going out to restaurants or whatever. A lot of times one person will take the bill, but then they'll expect everybody to sort of swish or use the money transfer app so everybody can foot their portion of the bill. It's less common here in Sweden that somebody will buy the first round and then the next person in this friend group will buy the second round and the next person in the friend group will buy the third round. It's a little bit less like that. It's more like everybody paying individually for their own sort of as they go. It's not always like that, but definitely more like that here than it is back home in the States. The third thing you should do is keep your shoes on if you're going into somebody else's home. And actually, even if you're going to a gym here in Sweden, you normally have to take a separate pair of gym shoes and switch your shoes out when you're going into the gym.
After you get where you're going, take off your shoes.
Now, coming from a German family myself, and also growing up in a rainy, cold area of the US, that Portland, Oregon area, we were coming from that background of always taking our shoes off before going inside. People in Sweden, they think this stereotype of Americans that never take off their shoes when going inside the house. That's not true if you come from a cold, dark area where there's lots of rain and stuff, because you don't want to track that kind of stuff in your house when it's rainy and cold. And it's the same thing in Sweden because they get a lot of snow in the wintertime, they get a lot of slush, and if you were to not take your shoes off, I mean, you see people, even in the wintertime when people set their shoes in the entryway to my apartment, I pretty much have to mop every time because all of that snowy slush just gets stuck to the shoes and track inside, and water, muddy, this mixture just gets everywhere. So you don't want that being tracked around the entire house. With that being said, even where I'm from, in like a colder environment in Portland, there are still some people that wear their shoes inside. Not as many as like LA or like a warm weather place, I'd imagine like Florida, the southern states in the US. But even in where I'm from, when we get rainy days, we have to have like a sign on the door to remind people like, hey, when you're coming to our house, please take your shoes off. Whereas in Sweden, it's sort of an unwritten rule that everybody just knows. The fourth thing you should not do around Swedish people is ignore personal space. Now, Sweden is a huge country with a lot of space and not a very large population. So things are very, very spread out here. Some people think that's why Swedish people tend to be more reserved than maybe some other parts of the world where there's more people in a smaller space. But Swedish people are used to having a lot of personal space around them. And especially now with COVID times, I think that's one of the reasons why Sweden wasn't as strict with implementing like mask rules and these sorts of things. And just they were content for people to hold the 2-meter distance between each other because Swedish people are already so used to that. And it was completely different. I went on a trip to Spain for work a few weeks ago, and it was with people wearing masks everywhere, but people were packed tightly. People would come stand up next to you all the time. I was in Barcelona, that big city feel where people were always very, very close in proximity. But I think that there is a cultural difference with Sweden, that people are just used to more personal space. You see it whenever people are waiting in lines at the bus stop, at the grocery store, wherever they are. And then especially now with Corona and those practices that we've implemented, it's even more pronounced. And the fifth and final thing you should not do around Swedish people is to skip the line. But you really shouldn't skip the line in any country that you're in. I think that's pretty much rude anywhere, but this will be increasingly shocking to Swedes. Now, one thing that was different from me is when you go into like a normal boutique or a normal store here in Sweden, well, if you were to do that in America, you could just normally go right up to the salesperson and they would help you directly. People are very like customer focused in America. There's very, very good customer service in the US, and here it's not quite the same vibe. You're kind of expected, even if there's nobody else in there, to kind of take a number when you come in the door and wait for somebody to press the number and basically get service after your number comes up. This is actually one of those things, like when I first came to Sweden, I would just walk in and try to get the salespeople's attention to help me, and they kind of wouldn't like pay attention to me. And then somebody would come in after me and take a number from the number producing machine. And then sure enough, they could go in before me because they took the number and I didn't, even though I was there first. So when you come to Sweden, take a number and don't cut in line. It's just a different mentality when it comes to little things like that. So there you have it, guys. Those were 5 things you should not do around Swedish people. I've made some more videos like this. For example, this video, 5 things you should not do in Sweden. If you want to check out that, be sure to check that out. If you liked this video and found it interesting, be sure to hit the like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, if you could just do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. I'm getting so close to 100K, and by smashing that subscribe button, you would really be helping me out and hitting that goal that I've had for a very, very long time. So with that being said, thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see everybody in another one.